And we're live. Welcome to NFL, where the NFL starts and ends. This week, I think, as you can tell from the title, there's a lot of late game comebacks. As we'll first start off with the Colts. The Colts and Vikings had played. They were the first Saturday game, and the Colts were up at one point, 33-0. By the end of the game, they lost 39-36. How does this happen to the Colts all the time? It doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. And if you're the Colts, how can you continue to play this way? Where you're up a lot and then you're down and you lose. And you can say it's Matt Ryan, you can say it's Jeff Saturday. I'm going to say this. The defensive coordinator of the Colts is Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards was also the defensive coordinator of the Raiders last year. And I was critical when Gus Edwards got the defensive coordinator job in Indianapolis because his defense can be really good or really bad. And this year for the Colts, it's been really bad. They are injured beyond repair. I get that. But there comes a point where you got to play better defense than that. For an example, the Vikings, they faced a couple teams that either they win or they lose, but their defense gives up a lot of yards. The best example of this is a couple weeks ago when they faced the Jets. They gave up 500 yards of total offense. They won, but they gave up 500 yards of total offense. Their defense is bend, 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 but don't break. But when you have a team that does that, eventually they are going to break. Because there are teams that can. The one thing that the Vikings have a really difficult time in doing is they give up yards after the catch. If you know how to stop Justin Jefferson and you know how to slow down, I shouldn't say stop Justin, slow down Justin Jefferson, slow down Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison, you practically got them beat because Hawkinson, Osborne, and Thielen aren't going to be able to just do that. The only way they get open most of the time is if you double cover Jefferson. But if you have a good corner, or even a great corner, that can go and cover up your guy one-on-one, that's it. That's what happens. So, if you're the Vikings, and I know all these media pundits are all going to say the Vikings are the best team in the NFL. Look how good they play. Just the same thing like the Eagles. The Eagles barely beat the Bears, yet they're going to say the Eagles are the best team in the NFL. To me, the best team in the NFL is the team that plays the most complete games. Not the team that wins necessarily. Who plays the most complete games? Who plays the game from start to end? Their offense is good, their defense is good, their special team is good. When you got players, when you got coaches and teams that don't do that all the time, and they don't play that well. So for me, I'd say the most complete team is the Bills. Because and the Chiefs. The Bills and the Chiefs are the two best teams. Because their offense is good, their defense is good, and their special teams are good. When they don't do that, they don't play well. So they're the most consistent. If their offense is bad, their defense is probably going to be pretty bad. Their special teams is not going to be great either. But when they're on the roll, they can do those things, and they'll be the best team. The Vikings aren't the best team. Neither are the Eagles. The Eagles are a very good team, and so are the Vikings. They're very good teams. They're just not the best team in the NFL. Next up, the NFL grading system needs to change in terms of what we give teams at the end of the day when the game is over. Now, NFL players don't care for these things. They don't. They're like, who cares? If you're an NFL fan, you care. And for the last year or so, I've watched, like in CBS Sports, that's just the most. I remember a couple weeks ago was one of the. We'll talk about the Jets and the Vikings in this situation. The Vikings gotta be. The Jets gotta see. Yes, the Jets lost, but the Jets fought the whole way through it. They played well enough. They didn't score. That's what happens. Yet people are going to say the Vikings are very good. They are. But we got to understand there is a interesting denominator in this situation, which is you're a good team, yes, but the grading system doesn't make sense. Like if you look at it between the Cowboys and Jacksonville yesterday, they gave the Jacksonville Jaguars an A. At one point, the Jaguars were down 17. How can you give them an A? How can you even give them an A? You can't. They weren't winning the whole game. They didn't win. They weren't leading the whole game until the fourth quarter. If anything, a full game, an A would be a full game of good offense, good defense, good special teams throughout. Like an A plus would be you give up less than 10 points. An A or A minus would be you give up less than 20. And a B is you give up a little more than 20. The Jaguars gave up 34 points. They don't get an A. You don't get an A if you give up 30 plus points. Because chances are you're going to lose games if you give up 34 points. That's just the numbers behind it, which we'll get to the numbers in a minute. The Cowboys, beginning of the game for the first half, they were really good. I would have given them B plus or A minus. They were not perfect, but I would have given them that. Then they completely crumble and they lose the game. You can't expect that at all. Yet they still score 34 points. Chances are they would win that game because they scored 34 points. But they didn't. That's what happens. But you can't go and say, well, they get a C. Because if that's a C, you can't give the Jaguars an A. You got to go and be like, well, maybe the Cowboys get a D or an F for the second half. And therefore, now you have to go do the same thing to the Jaguars and say, well, maybe they get a C for the second half. They were good enough in the second half to win. They get a C overall. That's what would happen. The same thing goes for the Vikings and Colts. You can't give the Vikings an A. You can't. You can't give the Colts an A. You can't give the Colts an F. If you want to give the Colts an F, you can say, well, that fourth quarter, that third quarter, then you can. And then average it out at that point if you want. But if you're going to go and say they get an A because they won, that's like people who say, I'm giving you an A for effort when they were in school. I'm giving you an A for effort. First off, effort doesn't even start with an A. It starts with an E. But yet you're gonna go and say, I get an A for doing something that I didn't accomplish, where someone else worked 10 times harder than me, got an A, and then I get the same grade. Doesn't make sense. Now, you ask in all this, what case? The Vikings, the Cowboys did not play the best games. The Vikings won, the Cowboys lost. But at the same time, at what point do you give them an A or not? The Cowboys and the Bills had made 2 signings. They signed wide receivers. Cowboys signed T.Y. Hilton. The Bills signed Cole Beasley. The reason why this was done for the Cowboys is because they want someone that can play right now. And the Bills are probably in the same boat. They want someone to play right now who knows enough of the system that they can put out there and make some plays. Now, we will talk about the Cowboys more in a minute. But Cole Beasley, we know what he is. He retired after, and then 9 weeks later came back. It's just the way it is. Beasley's whole reason of retiring with the Bucks, he said, I retired with the Bucks because I wasn't making as much money as the other people above me. Therefore, I knew those players were going to play more than me. I don't really think that was the answer that I'd give, but I can understand where he's coming from. T.Y. Hilton, both of these guys are 33 years old. T.Y. hasn't played all year. He says he's healthy. The Cowboys had him, jokingly, a lot of Cowboy insiders say that the Cowboys had T.Y. Hilton run in the backyard, and that's what they did. And he did well enough that the Cowboys signed him. Now, I want to talk about this. This is very important to me because I saw this a lot on Saturday, and I saw this yesterday too. Coaches, specifically young coaches, don't want to run the ball on third down. These young coaches that we call creative, genius coaches don't want to run the ball on third down. I'll give you a great example in the Miami Dolphins vs. Buffalo Bills contest, where we all thought it was going to be a winter wonderland, and the snow only came in the fourth quarter. The Dolphins had multiple third down and ones, and their run game, for the most part, was the way they were moving the ball down the field because the Bills had a trouble stopping it. And yet they decided to throw most of them. And a lot of them became incompletions. They had to punt. But you ask, well, why would they throw for it? Because these young coaches don't want to run the ball on third down. I'll give you another example. Cowboys versus Jacksonville. The Cowboys defense gets a key turnover. Jacksonville's using all their timeouts to try to get the ball back at as much time as possible. It was a third down. I believe it was 3rd and 14, if I remember correctly. Jacksonville has one timeout. Keep that in mind. It's 3rd down and 14 with about a minute 20 or less on the clock. I think it's about a minute 20. If you're the Cowboys, the smart thing you would do as a play caller would go and be like, either a short pass that is easily completed, that it's not designed to get the first down. It's just designed so we can get the ball out quickly and get a couple yards, take some time off this clock, force them to use their timeout, then we punt the ball away and play the field position game. Or we run the ball, try to pick up a couple yards, force them to call timeout, play the field position game. We punt away and move on. Well, that's not what happened. Kellen Moore, the play caller for the Dallas Cowboys, decides to throw a deep shot, to throw the ball deep down the field, try to pick up this first down. It was incomplete. So it didn't just, yes, you ticked off some clock, but you stopped the clock and you didn't force them to use their timeout. So you don't force them to use their timeout. You punt the ball away. The time's not going. You punt the ball away. Now they have a timeout, and that put the game in overtime, essentially. Because now they have a timeout to call, timeout, get the kicker out, and do all these things. Whereas Kellen Moore would have just ran the ball, they would have had to either take a timeout, the Jaguars would have, or allow the clock to just tick all the way down. That's what they would have had to do. There was two choices. They would have taken the first one to give themselves the most chance. That's what they would have done. Now, that's not all saying that they wouldn't have been able to kick the field goal without the timeout. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the likelihood, the aggressiveness that they would have had to play with would have been different than if they didn't have a timeout compared to that they did. That would have been different. Because you play differently if you have a timeout. You won't be as conservative without a timeout as you will be with, because you can play differently. I can give you a great example. What the Raiders did to the Patriots. The Raiders have to punt the ball with about 3 minutes on the clock, about 3.5 minutes. They punt the ball, they get a defensive stop, they use all their timeouts on defense. They get the ball back with about 2.5 minutes to go. They go down the field, they still have the 2-minute warning, so they still kind of had a timeout to regroup and get everything settled. And they go score a touchdown. And when they go score that touchdown, they go and tie the game by doing that. Where if they don't have that, if they don't use those timeouts, they lose that clock and maybe they don't have that opportunity. So it was all reasoned based. If you would have forced Jacksonville to go down the field with no timeouts, maybe it would have won you the game if you're the Cowboys, maybe it wouldn't have. But it would have given you a better odds to do so. But the Cowboys decided to throw it. Which brings me back to my original question. Why do coaches refuse to run the ball on third down? Why do young coaches refuse to do it? And my answer is this. Because they're so trying to win the game, they're not realizing that sometimes you have to play the field position game. I know it's boring. I get it. I know it's boring. I know that. But sometimes, and I know it's almost frowned upon, but sometimes you have to play that way. Sometimes you have to play that in order for the best of the team. And when you have a team that's like that and expects to win the game with these deep passes, yes, they may work, and yes, you would probably win the game, but it's more risk. What I would have done is run the ball. And if I did want to throw the ball short where I know there's going to be success. That's my only goal. and tell my guys, don't get out of bounds. If you catch the ball, turn upfield, and then go down. If you're going to get hit, go down. That way you don't go out of bounds. Maybe something fluky happens when you get a penalty against the defense, or you make them waste their last time out. That's what I would have done. It's not what happened. Now, we alluded to this between the Cowboys and Jacksonville. The Cowboys collapsed in the third and fourth quarters. But I really want to talk about this. The Cowboys have had injury problems the last 2 weeks. I will give you that. But you're up 17 points, 24-7 at halftime. At this point, I'm thinking it's an easier. You're now on cruise control, and I think that's what the defense thought. They were on cruise control. There's a problem. You got a team that's willing to fight back in Jacksonville, and you got teams in the playoffs that are going to do the same because their season's on the line. Every time you play, your season's on the line. Whether or not your record says it or not. They are. It's on the line all the time. You don't need to have someone go and say that to you. You know that. Now, there is a few people to blame on this. The interceptions have to go down if you're Dak Prescott. I don't dispute that. They have to go down. There's too many. Too many mistakes. The offensive line is in shambles. You lose Terrence Steele. You gain Tyron Smith. You choose to play Tyron Smith at right tackle. Okay. But you can't run the ball now. You can't run it. You can't run the ball for whatever reason. On defense, you lose Leighton Vander Esch. You lost Jonathan Hankins last week. You gave 5 yards of carry to Travis Etienne and Agnew. That can't happen. You allowed Zay and Marcus Jones to go deep on you, and you couldn't stop it. And then, on top of all this, Kelvin Joseph, your young corner who was taking over for Anthony Brown, who was supposed to be, at one point, Anthony Brown's replacement, he gets benched because he's not playing well. He didn't play well last week. He didn't play well this week. Now you got an issue because now you're like, we got some players. We put Nahshon Wright in the game and hope that would work. He was better, but that's not a high bar compared to Kelvin Joseph. So in my mind, you're like, okay, you brought in Mackenzie Alexander from the streets. You brought in Trayvon Mullen from the Cardinals. Picked him off waivers. You have drafted Nahshon Wright, though he hasn't played much, if at all. And then you have Israel Mukuamu, who was a corner at South Carolina. He's now a safety for you guys, but you know he can play corner. So my question would be, if you're the Cowboys, is this. Do we, because you face Philadelphia this week, do we find a guy like Mullen or like Mukuamu or Alexander that can go and just play the ball? Because the one thing that Kelvin Joseph's always had a problem with since he's entered the NFL is he's so worried about the wide receiver and where he's going that when the ball does or is thrown his direction, he's not looking for the ball. He's not looking to make a play on the ball. He's so focused on the wide receiver. And this is the problem with having young corners is you will see sometimes they get lost when they don't do what they should be doing. This causes a problem. So Joseph was benched. You got injuries everywhere. Your team is struggling. Yet you still scored 34 points. Your defense has been good the last 2-3 weeks. You gave up 19 points to the Colts. You gave up 23 points to the Texans. You now give up 30 points to the Jaguars. Or 40 points to the Jaguars, excuse me. If I'm Dan Quinn, I'm going into my office on Monday morning, and when I show my players the tape, I'm going right back, and I'm replaying the whole third quarter, fourth quarter, over and over again. And I'm gonna go and say, guys, we play Philadelphia on Christmas Eve, on Saturday. We can't play like that. If we play like that, we'll lose. Plain and simple. If we play like that, we'll lose. Is he wrong? Nope. He's not wrong. You know why he's not wrong? He's not wrong because he has been doing this. And that's a problem that needs to be fixed. If you're the people who think that's the same way, that can perform the same way, you ain't going to win a lot of games. I'm sorry about that. Now, a lot of people want to say, well, it's McCarthy's fault. It's Kellen Moore's fault. It's Dan Quinn's fault. It's the players' fault. It's Dak Prescott's fault. It's Jerry Jones' fault, which I don't understand how it could be Jerry Jones' fault. Because if Jerry Jones' job is to be owner and general manager, what has he done that would affect the game on Sunday? He's drafted well. Yes, that could be Will McClay, Stephen Jones, sure. But he's the one that he puts his name on the back of the card. He's picked up free agents. He's brought people in. He's done everything he can do. At what point do you go and say, no, it's not his fault. No, because it isn't. People want to blame Jerry Jones. At what point can Jerry Jones say it's my fault? Because he's brought in all the talent he can. All the talent he can. Do we agree with his system? No. I don't agree with that you should only draft players and develop. I don't think that's the right way to do it. But that's not my choice. It's not my decision. Because I don't run the organization. He does. He's going to do whatever he wants. So you can't blame Jerry Jones. Would I blame Mike McCarthy? The thing I've been saying the last couple weeks is, have they had slow starts? The last 2 weeks? No. They haven't had slow starts. They've been pretty good. It's near the tail end of the game. So if you want to blame him for anything, blame him for that. And if you don't want to blame him, you don't have to blame him. You absolutely do not have to. But That's not for me to decide. Next up would be, if you wanted to blame anyone, it'd be Dan Quinn or Kellen Moore. That makes sense. But I don't think that goes and tells you anything about how you perform in the game. It doesn't. Next up would be, if you want to blame the players, you can blame the players. Now, I will say this. If McCarthy and this team doesn't win a playoff game, is McCarthy fired? Possibly. And is it possible that the Cowboys try and get Sean Payton? It is possible. Now, if it was my choice, and I could say, Dan, we want you here, but we don't want Kellen Moore here, and we don't want Mike McCarthy here. But we want you here, but we want you to remain as D coordinator. Would he take that? I don't know. I don't know if he'd take that. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But I could see that happening. That the Cowboys go and say, "Hey, we're going to try and get Sean Payton." This doesn't work. I don't know. We'll see. A person though that I wouldn't blame for the second interception that cost the Cowboys the game, I wouldn't blame Dak Prescott. He threw a good ball. It was a good ball. There's nothing else he could do. The ball hit Noah Brown in his hands, and Noah didn't catch it. The ball tipped up went up in the air, got intercepted, returned for a pick six. There's nothing that Dak Prescott could have done. It wasn't like he could have thrown a better ball. He could have been more accurate. He had it in the hands. And again, Noah Brown just didn't catch it. But if you're talking about the failure of your coaching staff, a lack of trying to get the ball to CeeDee Lamb and Mike Gallup, and also trying to figure out where James Washington is and where T.Y. Hilton is, and where do they fit in this offense because they're not getting used right now. That's the one thing I'm wondering. Moving on to the Lions are not exactly quote unquote dead yet, as they've won 6 of their last 7. This was a team that was 1-6 at one point, and everyone thought Dan Campbell's going to be fired. That didn't happen. He's actually not been the issue. And they've won 6 of their last 7, and they almost won that game that they lost against the Bills. They could have. They just didn't play well enough at the end. But they could have won. That's how good they are. And they're scary. Because it's not like the record's gonna fail you necessarily. And it's not like you're gonna say, well, they were the 7th seed. How are they the hardest team to go against? Because they fight to the end. And they'll punish you with hits. I when the Cowboys had played them early in the year, when Dak Prescott returned in week 7, that was, if you asked Dak Prescott what the hardest game to play was, he'd probably say that one. Because they hit you and they have a ferociousness to them. That's a big thing to think about. The Lions also are one of the better teams in doing that. That they're really good. Do I still think they're a year away? Yeah, maybe they're a year away. But I'll tell you this. Dan Campbell gets my vote for Coach of the Year because of the way he's coached. He's been magnificent. Final thing before we get to the previews and recaps. The owners, this came out yesterday, want a week or 2 week extension on the trade deadline. I think this is a great idea because the trade deadline, sometimes you never notice what you need. Sometimes you never notice. And when you do notice, it's too late. The trade deadline, I think, it's week 8, week 9 in the season. You may only know what you need by week 9 or 10. Therefore, give them that long so we can figure out what's happened. And it also may make more sense to do that if a team is sinking and they're not playing well and they need help. They realize that maybe they need a player or maybe they want to get rid of a player. The value changes. Maybe that's the case. Now, it's only a rumor, but I hope there is truth behind it. Our game recap. The 49ers beat the Seattle Seahawks 21-13 in a game that wasn't that close. I think Brock Purdy is a really good quarterback from what he's being asked to do. However, I do have questions. There's times where is he really facing the best defense? I believe they faced Detroit at one point. I think not next week, but the week after. That's going to be a test, I think. I know they face the Giants. That's not really going to be a thing. We'll see what Wink Martindale decides to do. But next up, the Bills beat the Dolphins 32-29. And again, we talked about the Dolphins. If they run the ball on third down, they were probably going to beat the Bills. But they were trying so hard to make Tua the hero. You can't win that way. You can't. You got to do what's best for the team. Not is what's best for the player. Jacksonville beat the Cowboys 40-34 in a game the Cowboys just couldn't find them what they were trying to do in the second half, and that's disappointing. Next up, Raiders beat Patriots 30-24 in a game they didn't play well. The Patriots didn't, and the Raiders didn't play well. But in this league, you never know what's going to happen. But I said this last week, Belichick always struggles against his apprentices, against his assistant coaches when they become head coaches. They are not good. The Patriots aren't good when they go against those teams for whatever reason. I don't know. They said Belichick is I think they said he was 13-15 or 13-28 or something like that. But in the recent years, he's now 1-7 when he goes against his assistants. And I believe that one win that he did have was against Bill O'Brien when he was with the Houston Texans. Next up, Bengals beat the Bucks 34-23 in a game that the Bucks were winning 17-0. So we're talking as much about the Cowboys, who were up 17 and lost, and about how much the Colts were up 33 and lost. The Bucks did a very similar thing, where they're up 17, they lose, and they lost by 11. The thing about this Bucks team is they don't score. They don't score. When they do score, the one thing I'm afraid of when you face Tom Brady is the fact that eventually they're going to turn the page and be all on the same page. They haven't done that yet, but I know it's coming. I know it's coming. If they find their way in the playoffs, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Period. That they find themselves doing what they should be doing. Wouldn't surprise me. Next up, Eagles beat the Bears 25-20 in a game Jalen Hurts had 2 interceptions. We aren't talking about that because they won. If that was the Cowboys stat line and the Cowboys beat Jacksonville 25-20, we'd be talking about what's wrong with the Cowboys. They only scored 25 points. Where the Eagles scored 25. Best team in the NFL. Really? Because if I was going by my calculations, the best team that had the most points was Jacksonville. And one of the highest scoring games was Bengals and Bucks, Raiders and Patriots, Cowboys and Jaguars, and Bills and Dolphins. And you were against the Bears. And you only scored 25. That doesn't make you the best team of the week. I'm not saying you're not the best team in the NFL. I still believe that's the Bills and Chiefs. But that's not saying that you're not the best team. That's saying for this week, you didn't play well. And the same goes for the Cowboys. Eventually, when you don't play well, you're going to get got. Moving into a preview of week 16 already, the season's flying by. Our regular season record is 47-36 after we went 5-1 this past week. The Bengals faced New England Patriots. Patriots are getting plus 3.5. I'm taking the Bengals. The Patriots, I can't think on how they're going to play. They just don't play well. And there's times like the game against the Vikings, they scored points, and then the next week they didn't score any. Next up, I'm taking the Bengals 31-10. Next up, Seahawks vs. Chiefs. Chiefs are getting 9.5. They're 9.5-point favorites. I'm taking the Chiefs. Seahawks will make it competitive, but I don't trust their defense. Chiefs win 28-24. Next up, Eagles vs. Cowboys. Somehow the Cowboys are favored by 2. I know the Cowboys are at home, but I know the Cowboys haven't played well the last 2 weeks. This is a scary game if I'm the Cowboys, because if I don't play well, I'm going to hear it. Not just in the media, but by my fans that are right there on Christmas Eve. I am at Homer. I'm going to take the Cowboys on this. I don't know how they're going to win, but I think they can win. Close game, 2017 Cowboys. Next up, Raiders versus Steelers. 50 years, the 50-year anniversary of the Immaculate Reception. That's been the whole thing that they put this in prime time. I don't understand why it's in prime time. I understand it's the 50th anniversary, but I don't get why it's in prime time. These are two of the worst teams in football, and yet they're in prime time. And we don't even know if Kenny Pickett is going to play. It might be Mitch Trubisky, it might be Rudolph, it might be whoever. It could be someone you find in a 7-Eleven store. Who knows? Steelers are favored by 2.5. I'm taking the Steelers because somehow, in all this craziness, Mike Tomlin still has a chance to make it to the playoffs. And he would drag this team if he has to. I'll take the Steelers. Close game. 24-21. Next up, I should say, Bucks vs. Cardinals. Cardinals are getting +4. Didn't we think about this when the season started? Oh, we want to see Tom Brady and the 6-8 Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Arizona Cardinals that are getting led by Colt McCoy. That's what we all wanted to see. Apparently so, and both teams are going in 2 different directions. Not in terms of records, but in terms of one's going to the playoffs and one isn't. I'm taking the Bucks. I don't trust the Cardinals. Cardinals don't play well. Defense, they're okay. They're pretty good. Offense, they're a mess. Taking the Buccaneers. Score is 28-13. Thank you for subscribing to what we do. If you do like the video, I would strongly suggest you like the video and subscribe as we do a stream sometimes multiple times a week.